From the heartland of America and the gateway to the West, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Noory. Welcome to Coast AM. We got a split show for you tonight. Later on, Alex Jones joins us, his perspective on world events. And in a moment, Jesse Ventura joins us for a special 2-hour portion of Coast AM, his latest work, 63 documents the government doesn't want you to read. Stand by for that. Here's what's happening. Well, the U.S. government says it has prevented more than 350 people suspected of ties to al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups from boarding U.S.-bound commercial flights since the end of 2009. The tighter security rules imposed after the attempted bombing of an airliner on Christmas 2009 reveal a security threat, they say, that persisted for more than 7 years after the 9/11 attacks. The U.S. Navy has fired a laser gun from one of its ships for the very first time. Researchers used the high-energy laser to disable a boat by setting fire to its engines off the coast of California. Similar systems had previously been tested on land. However, moist sea air presented an extra challenge as it reduces a beam's power. The Navy said the shipborne lasers could eventually be used to protect vessels from small attack boats. A strong new earthquake rattled Japan's northeast Monday as the government urged more people living near a tsunami-crippled nuclear plant to simply leave, citing concerns about long-term health risks from radiation. The magnitude 7.0 aftershock, which trapped some people in collapsed homes, came just hours after residents bowed their heads and wept in ceremonies to mark a month since a massive earthquake and tsunami killed up to 25,000 people there. While the price of gas above $3.50 a gallon in almost all states but one, there are signs that Americans are cutting back on driving now, reversing a steady increase in demand for fuel as the economy improves, they say. Gas sales have fallen for 5 straight weeks, the first time that has happened since November. Before the decline, demand was increasing for 2 months. Some analysts had expected the trend to continue because the economic recovery, they say, is picking up, adding 216,000 jobs since March. Up next, former Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura joins us. We will be talking about 63 documents the government doesn't want you to read. That's next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Noory. Let me tell you a little bit about our special guest tonight, Jesse Ventura, former independent governor of Minnesota. He's also a former member of the Navy Underwater Demolition 12 team. Professional wrestler, you all know that, movie actor, talk show host as well, and a visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Currently the host and executive producer of True TV's Conspiracy Theory with Jesse Ventura. And he's got this reputation as the ultimate nonpartisan truth seeker. He has no qualms, as you'll hear, about questioning authority, and he's our special guest tonight on Coast to Coast Worldwide. Jesse, welcome to the program. How are you?
Hi, George. Good to be here. I'm a little tired, when you get on the book tours. It's like about a dozen days right now of getting up about 5:30 in the morning and finishing about 11 at night or later.
Oh, it's a lot. I know when you're on the West Coast, I'm going to mention where you're going to be tomorrow and the next day. I just left Los Angeles, Jesse. I do my shows now between L.A. and St. Louis, and I go back and forth, and it does get to you after a while.
Oh, yeah, especially in a book tour like this, it's a whirlwind. You do about 14 to 16 days, and you do so many interviews, you can't even remember them all, and you do these blocks of radio at times where you do 3 hours straight with, 30 stations or whatever it might be. But, you just got to focus, and like I do, I call it put it on automatic and just fly through it. And, of course, I'd rather be busy than laying around doing nothing because then time marches much slower that way.
Well, at least shows like this, Jesse, you're on 542 stations tonight. So you don't have to worry about it.
You're that big.
Oh, it is. It's the largest overnight show in the country. It took the spot where Larry King had this late night slot, then Art Bell, and then here I am. And I echo you a little bit. I mean, I was never an elected official, but I lived in Minneapolis. I was in the Navy, and I've got to tell you, Jesse, not a day goes by where I don't get an email from one of our listeners talking about your television show and what you do, because it is right down everyone's alley. You're a truth seeker. You're looking for it. Our friend Alex Jones, who's going to follow you a little bit later on tonight, same thing. We're looking for the truth. Have you always been that way?
Yeah, pretty much. I've always been a person. I don't like to be deceived. I can handle the truth. Using the old Jack Nicholson thing from A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. Well, I believe I can. I would rather know the truth than to have it withheld from me. It's just that simple. I can deal with the truth and I'll adapt to it as long as I know what it is, and so it's that simple.
You dedicated your book, 63 Documents, to a fellow that we think the world of on this program. He's been a guest, and like you, I think he's probably one of the only honest elected officials out there now, Congressman Ron Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. I've known Congressman Paul since I met him at the 2008 Counter Convention in Minneapolis. That was the year that the Republican National Convention was there, and naturally, Congressman Paul wasn't overly welcomed in the Republican National Convention, so he held the Counter Convention. They were over at the XL Center, which is the hockey center where the Minnesota Wild plays, and he held the Counter Convention in Minneapolis at the Target Center where the Timberwolves play. And what I found unique about the whole situation, when you went, which I had to go over to the Republican thing to do a couple TV things, so I had to go over there the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found amazing was the Republican convention looked like a prison. They put up massive barriers, massive fencing. You had to go through 3 layers of security things plus a metal detector just to get in.
Oh,
now, countering that, where we were over at the Target Center when Congressman Paul asked me if I'd be a keynote speaker, which I heartily agreed to do as soon as I knew they would let me talk about anything I wanted to. I'm a former season ticket holder of the Timberwolves. We had no more security than the normal security that's at a Timberwolf basketball game.
That is amazing.
There was no security outside, and we were sold out to the brink. There was 15,000 people in there, whatever it was. But I thought, how strange this is that Ron Paul's counter convention, including people like me, required virtually no additional security. And yet when you went over to the Republican convention, like I said, it looked like they were the center of a prison with like 4 of those big fences you see around prisons.
That's right.
With 3 security things to get in, plus they even had helicopters flying over the top. That type of security. And I thought, who are really the culprits here? Who really are the bad guys? Why would you need to be protected to that level?
That's a good point. And
where Ron Paul and all of us, we didn't require that. I drove up to the back door. They sent a car for me. Pulled up to the back door, got out of the car, went inside, met Congressman Paul and all this. We had the normal rental security of the Minnesota Timberwolves basketball that's there all the time. The other side, they had to bring in multiple police units from Minneapolis, St. Paul, all the suburbs, and they literally closed down streets, too. It went out like 5 blocks into the area of where commerce takes place, and all these people that wanted to do business had to shut their businesses down.
There were also people who lived in the area. They couldn't get to their houses.
Yeah, exactly. All of this just to provide security for the Republican convention. And I thought, this speaks volumes to me. Who really is loved by the people that didn't need any protection, and why would these Republicans require that type of protection?
Let's break a major story tonight, Jesse. Tell us you're running with Ron Paul in 2012.
Well, I said that on Good Morning America, I think it was, back, and I did that, and I'll tell you this, but I had a caveat with it. It requires Congressman Paul to leave the Republican Party, because I'm an equal opportunity disliker of both parties. I don't like the Democrats. I don't like the Republicans. My belief is they are not the solution. They are the problem. For lack of a better term, they've sold their soul to rock and roll. You can go to both of their conventions and see the same high-priced corporate lobbyists at both, paying them all off. So it doesn't matter who wins. I like to refer to it as like going into the grocery store. and you go to the soft drink department, and the only choices you're offered are Coke and Pepsi, 2 colas, one slightly sweeter than the other. There's no root beer, there's no orange, there's no 7-Up, there's no Mountain Dew. All you get is Coke and Pepsi, and that's your choice. I thought Ralph Nader described them perfectly. It's the two-party dictatorship that we're under today in our country. And so getting back, so I said that I would give serious consideration. I didn't say I would do it, but if Congressman Paul would leave the Republican Party, I would give serious consideration to being his running mate.
People just want honest government, Jesse, as you well know. I mean, your victory, as you became governor of Minnesota with the Reform Party at the time, was I thought it was a message to the world that people just wanted somebody in there that they could believe. They were fed up with the parties. They were fed up with the political system. And you won. Did it surprise you?
No, I don't do anything to lose. I didn't go into that race to lose.
No, I know that.
I went in to win, and I knew if the chips fell right, and I knew that if things worked out, and the big mistake made was this. The Democrats made a movement that I suppose they thought would be very honorable, but that isn't why they did it. They stated they would not debate unless I was included, because they felt because I'm fiscally conservative and I'm for smaller government and less intrusive government, they thought that I would zap votes away from St. Paul Mayor, former Senator Norm Coleman, who was the opponent, and of course it was Hubert H. Skip Humphrey, the son of Vice President Hubert Humphrey and our Attorney General at the time. They made that decision thinking that I would, take enough votes away from Coleman to ensure a Humphrey victory. Well, at the time, Humphrey was polling, I think, about 44 to 46%. Coleman was polling about 32, and I was at 10. Wow. 7 weeks before the election, but when they made the statement that they wouldn't debate unless I was included, I sat back in the corner like a Cheshire cat.
And
I said, you have no idea the mistake you just made, because I go by the simple thing that I like to say, call it a cliche or whatever. If I can debate them, I can beat them. Because these two parties are so full of baggage, they're so corrupt, that a person like me who doesn't have the corruption can expose their corruption. And you notice how the media and no movies were made or anything about what we accomplished there.
You're right.
This was bigger than people could believe. And I'm not saying it because I did it. Just the whole thing that happened, because here's the thing that all your listeners need to know, and I'll tell you a quick story.
Okay.
When I was growing up, and I was a teenager, my father, who was a World War II vet with an 8th grade education at the time, stated to me one day that all politicians are crooks. And I, of course, said, come on, Dad, you can't make a blanket statement like that. They can't all be crooks. And he said, oh, yes, they can. You want to know why? And I said, why? He said, because they spend $1 million for a job that only pays $100,000. Nobody in the private sector would do